They weren't drafted. They weren't forced. Every single one of the men who ran the gas chambers, shot civilians into mass graves, and built the machinery of the Holocaust volunteered, and most were rejected before they got the chance. In 1925, the SS did not exist as the world remembers it. There were no death camps. There were no black uniforms with the silver lightning bolts. There were 8 men. Adolf Hitler had just been released from prison after the failed beer hall putsch, and he was paranoid. The Nazi Party had a paramilitary wing called the SA, the Sturmabteilung, and it had grown into a force of hundreds of thousands of brawlers, street fighters, and ex-soldiers. Hitler did not trust them. The SA leadership was loyal to its own commanders, not to him personally, and Hitler knew that any man with a private army of that size was a future rival. So he ordered the creation of a smaller unit. A bodyguard. Fewer than 10 men, hand-picked, sworn to him alone. They call themselves the Schutzstaffel, which translates roughly to Protection Squadron. In English, the initials are SS. For the first 4 years of its existence, the SS was so small and so insignificant that most Germans had never heard of it. It was a glorified security detail for one man at political rallies. Its members wore brown shirts identical to the SA, with one small distinguishing feature, a black cap. Then in 1929, Hitler appointed a new commander. A failed chicken farmer named Heinrich Himmler. That decision changed the course of the 20th century. Heinrich Himmler was, by every account from people who met him, profoundly unimpressive. He was small, soft-spoken, physically weak, and obsessed with mysticism, racial pseudoscience, and medieval knighthood. He looked nothing like the Aryan ideal he spent his life promoting. But he was a relentless bureaucrat. And he had a vision for the SS that no one else in the Nazi Party had imagined. Himmler did not see the SS as a bodyguard. He saw it as the seed of a new racial aristocracy. A brotherhood of biologically pure Germans who would govern Europe for 1,000 years after the Nazi conquest. Every applicant had to prove Aryan ancestry going back to 1750. Officers had to prove it back to 1650. Their fiancés had to be approved by an SS racial bureau before marriage. Photographs of prospective brides were submitted for evaluation of skull shape, eye color, and racial value. When Himmler took over in 1929, the SS had 280 members. Within 4 years, it had over 50,000. He achieved this growth through a strategy that became the SS's defining feature: exclusivity. He rejected the vast majority of applicants. He demanded a minimum height of 5 feet 8 inches. He required a perfect dental record. He turned away men with the slightest physical imperfection. And the more he rejected, the more men wanted to join. This is the part that history textbooks tend to skip over. The SS was not feared because Germans were forced into it. It was feared because joining it was an honor. Membership came with status, women, professional advancement, and the ability to look down on every other German as racially inferior. By 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, the SS was no longer a bodyguard. It was a movement. The first time the SS killed for Hitler in large numbers, it killed other Nazis. By 1934, the SA had grown to nearly 3 million members. Its commander, Ernst Röhm, was openly calling for a second revolution that would replace the German army with the SA itself. Hitler could not afford this. The army still answered to President Hindenburg, and Hitler needed the army's support to consolidate power. So Hitler made a deal. He would destroy the SA leadership, and in exchange, the army would back his rise to absolute power. The man he chose to carry out the killings was Heinrich Himmler. The instrument was the SS. Over the night of June 30, 1934, and into the following 2 days, SS units arrested and executed at least 85 senior SA leaders, along with various political enemies Hitler wanted eliminated for unrelated reasons. Röhm was offered a pistol in his cell. When he refused to use it on himself, 2 SS men shot him through the chest. The Night of the Long Knives accomplished 2 things. It eliminated the SA as a political force, and it transformed the SS from a subsidiary of the SA into an independent organization answering only to Hitler. 3 weeks later, Hitler signed a decree making the SS a fully autonomous branch of the Nazi Party. Himmler now reported to no one but the Führer himself. The bodyguard had become a state within the state. Between 1934 and 1939, the SS grew into something no organization in modern history had ever been. It was not a military unit. It was not a police force. It was not an intelligence agency. It was all of these things at once, plus a corporation, plus a religious order, plus a colonial administration. Himmler divided his empire into branches. The Allgemeine SS, or General SS, was the original organization. By 1939 it had over 240,000 members, drawn from every profession in German society. Doctors, lawyers, professors, mayors, factory owners. Membership was part-time but came with enormous social privilege. The Sicherheitsdienst, or SD, was the SS intelligence service. It conducted surveillance on every German citizen, every political opponent, and eventually every occupied population in Europe. It was run by Reinhard Heydrich, the man Hitler privately called the man with the iron heart. The Geheime Staatspolizei, the Gestapo, became the SS political police force in 1936 when Himmler was appointed head of all German police. It had the legal authority to arrest, detain, and execute anyone deemed an enemy of the state, with no judicial oversight. The SS Totenkopfverbände, or Death's Head units, were the camp guards. They ran the concentration camp system from its founding at Dachau in 1933 through its industrial expansion across occupied Europe. And finally, the Waffen-SS, the armed SS, was created as a combat force that operated alongside the regular German army. By the end of the war it had nearly 1 million men under arms across 38 divisions, drawn from across occupied Europe and even from neutral countries. Each of these branches answered to Himmler. And Himmler answered only to Hitler. By 1939, the SS controlled the secret police, the intelligence service, the concentration camps, an independent army, and a growing economic empire of factories, quarries, and businesses funded by slave labor. There was no parallel for it in any modern state. The closest historical comparison is the Praetorian Guard of Imperial Rome, but even the Praetorians were never given an entire racial ideology and a continent to colonize. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, the SS went with the army. But it was not there to fight soldiers. Behind the front lines, special SS units called Einsatzgruppen, or task forces, moved into captured towns. Their orders were classified. Their mission was the systematic murder of civilians. Polish intellectuals, priests, nobles, government officials, and Jews were rounded up and shot. By the end of 1939, the Einsatzgruppen had killed an estimated 60,000 Polish civilians. This was the first phase of what the SS called the racial reordering of Europe. It was a rehearsal. In June 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the Einsatzgruppen were unleashed on a scale that has no parallel in human history. 4 task forces, totaling about 3,000 men, followed the German army into the Soviet Union with orders to kill every Jewish man, woman, and child they could find, along with communist officials, Roma, and any civilians suspected of resistance. Over the next 18 months, these 3,000 men shot approximately 1.5 million people. The killings happened in ravines, in forests, on the edges of villages. Victims were often forced to dig their own graves before being shot. The most infamous single massacre took place at Babi Yar, a ravine outside Kyiv, where SS units shot 33,771 Jews over the course of 2 days in September 1941. These killings created 2 problems for the SS. The first was logistical. Shooting that many people one at a time was slow. The second was psychological. Many of the SS men carrying out the killings began to suffer breakdowns, alcoholism, and suicides. Even Himmler, when he visited a mass shooting in Minsk in August 1941, vomited and nearly fainted. The SS leadership concluded that a more efficient method of mass murder was needed. One that would put psychological distance between the killers and the killed. The result was the death camp. In January 1942, 15 senior Nazi officials met in a villa outside Berlin called Wannsee. The meeting was chaired by Reinhard Heydrich. Its purpose was to coordinate what the Nazis called the final solution to the Jewish question. The plan that emerged at Wannsee was the systematic, industrial murder of every Jewish person in Europe, an estimated 11 million people. The SS would run the operation. The death camps would be the instrument. 6 camps were built or repurposed specifically for extermination: Chelmno, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. Each was designed to receive trainloads of victims, separate those capable of labor, and gas the rest within hours of arrival. The largest was Auschwitz-Birkenau. At its peak in the summer of 1944, during the destruction of Hungarian Jewry, it was killing as many as 6,000 people a day. The gas chambers were disguised as showers. Bodies were burned in industrial crematoria designed by a German engineering firm called Toff & Sons, whose surviving company records show that the engineers competed with one another to design more efficient ovens. This was not chaos. It was not the work of a few sadists. It was a bureaucracy. The SS staffed the camps with accountants, dentists, doctors, train schedulers, and quartermasters. Every shipment was logged. Every gold tooth was inventoried. Every pair of children's shoes was sorted, packed, and sent back to Germany for redistribution. The total number of people murdered by the SS in the Holocaust is estimated at 6 million Jews, plus approximately 3 million additional victims including Soviet POWs, Roma, disabled Germans, Polish civilians, political prisoners, and homosexuals. The total death toll for which the SS bears direct responsibility is approximately 9 million people. The men who ran this system were not, for the most part, mentally ill or unusually cruel by historical standards. They were ordinary career bureaucrats. They went home at the end of the day to their wives and children. They listened to classical music. They wrote letters complaining about the food in the camp commissary. The historian Hannah Arendt, watching the trial of Auschwitz administrator Adolf Eichmann in 1961, gave this phenomenon a name. She called it the banality of evil. While the death camps operated, the Waffen-SS fought the war. Originally a small armed wing of about 25,000 men in 1939, the Waffen-SS grew into a parallel army of over 900,000 by 1944. It fought in every major theater of the war. It produced some of the most effective combat divisions in the German military, including the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandart, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. The Waffen-SS also committed some of the worst war crimes of the European theater. The 2nd SS Panzer Division murdered 642 men, women, and children in the French village of Oradour-sur-Glane in June 1944. The 1st SS Panzer Division shot 84 American prisoners of war at Malmedy during the Battle of the Bulge. Multiple Waffen-SS units participated in the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto and the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. After the war, surviving Waffen-SS veterans organized themselves into a powerful lobbying group in West Germany called HIAG, which spent decades arguing that the Waffen-SS had been a normal military force unfairly tarred with the crimes of the camp guards and the Einsatzgruppen. This argument was largely accepted in Western popular culture for several decades. Modern historians have systematically dismantled it. The Waffen-SS was not separate from the rest of the SS. It was the same organization, the same ideology, and the same chain of command. Many Waffen-SS units rotated personnel through the death camps. Many camp guards were transferred into combat units when manpower ran short. The myth of the clean Waffen-SS soldier is one of the most successful pieces of post-war disinformation in modern history. By the spring of 1945, the SS empire was collapsing. The Red Army was closing in from the east. The Western Allies had crossed the Rhine. The death camps were being hastily evacuated, prisoners marched westward in death marches that killed an additional 250,000 people in the final months of the war. Himmler, panicking, attempted to negotiate a separate peace with the Western Allies through Swedish intermediaries. He believed that the Americans and the British would join him in a war against the Soviet Union. When Hitler learned of these negotiations, he stripped Himmler of all his ranks and ordered his arrest. On April 30, 1945, Hitler shot himself in his bunker. Himmler attempted to flee in disguise. He shaved his mustache, put on an eye patch, and posed as a discharged army sergeant. He was captured by British forces on May 22, 1945, and recognized within hours. While being examined by a British doctor, he bit down on a cyanide capsule hidden in his cheek and died within minutes. The SS itself was declared a criminal organization by the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg in 1946. Membership alone was prosecutable. Hundreds of senior officers were tried and executed. But thousands escaped. This is the part of the story that most documentaries leave out. The hunt for SS war criminals after 1945 was, by any measure, a failure. Of the estimated 200,000 SS men directly involved in mass murder, only a small fraction were ever prosecuted. The Nuremberg trials handled the senior leadership. A second wave of West German trials in the 1960s and 1970s prosecuted a handful of mid-level perpetrators. But the vast majority of camp guards, Einsatzgruppen members, and SS bureaucrats simply went home and resumed civilian life. Many used escape networks called rat lines, organized in part by sympathetic Catholic clergy and exploited by Cold War intelligence services on both sides. Adolf Eichmann, who organized the deportation of millions of Jews to the death camps, fled to Argentina and lived there for 15 years before Israeli intelligence kidnapped him in 1960. Joseph Mengele, the doctor who conducted experiments on prisoners at Auschwitz, lived openly in Brazil until his death in 1979. He was never captured. Klaus Barbie, the Gestapo chief of Leon known as the Butcher of Leon, was recruited by American intelligence after the war and helped to escape to Bolivia, where he worked for the Bolivian government for 3 decades before being extradited to France in 1983. In West Germany, hundreds of former SS officers held positions in the post-war government, including in the Foreign Intelligence Service, which was founded by a former Wehrmacht general using a network of ex-Nazi contacts. East Germany did the same on its side, just less openly. The myth that the SS was destroyed in 1945 is comforting. It is also wrong. The organization was dissolved. Its members, in most cases, were not punished. The SS started with 8 men in a beer hall. 20 years later, it had killed 9 million people, run a continent-wide empire of slave labor and industrial murder, and produced a military force of nearly 1 million men. It did all of this in a country that had been, 12 years earlier, a struggling democracy. The lesson of the SS is not that monsters exist. The lesson is that monsters are made out of clerks, farmers, schoolteachers, doctors, and bureaucrats, and that they can be made very quickly when a society decides that some of its members are not human. That is the entire history of the SS. If you found this video valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dive history content. Thank you for watching.